I was really happy to see your results. I want to hear more about where you started, what motivated you to do the testosterone protocol,
Hmm.
and how it's been working out and what comes next.
Absolutely, absolutely. Firstly, once again, thank you so much for making time. And I want to tell you that you are the one that prompted me to do it and inspired me to do it. And after speaking with you, I really wanted to see, with everything, it's stated this in my post. It's not one size fits all. It's really one size fits one, and there's only one way to find out. So I think that's really important to note. As you can see in the post, there's a lot of activity and a lot of people were excited to jump in. I think most Thomas are excited to figure out if it works for them. Then conversely, there are people who are doubters, and what I would say to them is there's really only one way to find out. And I'm not so sure that cold water immersion is terrible for you. Maybe there are cases out there. I'd have to hear more information based on each person's situation. But regardless, you will feel better. And that was important to me. I felt better. So,
So we should probably summarize, for the benefit of our audience. You and I spoke, it might have even been a year ago. And
mhm.
I think it was because you read one of my articles about what happened to my testosterone when I started doing ice baths every day. I was
That's right.
really doing it to manage some prostate inflammation because at the time I was in my early 50s. I'm overweight, and I didn't want to do the biopsy. I didn't want a prostatectomy, so I thought I'm going to do ketosis. I'm going to do ice baths. But then when I went to get my prostate-specific antigen remeasured, I also got my testosterone remeasured, and I came out with this huge boost, like from mid 700s to about 1180 nanograms per deciliter, which is unheard of for a man my age and my shape. So I wrote this little article. You're in a completely different situation. You're in great shape. We've seen your pictures online. You're cut. You're the last guy that we would think would ever have a problem with testosterone. But we had this conversation, and you thought, okay, I'll try this ice bath and then exercise protocol and see what happens. And your labs went from mid 500s to upper 800s. This is an increase of at least a third at a time of year when actually a lot of men are going down because the days are getting shorter, there's a little less vitamin D. And the remarkable thing is that your doctors probably never would have said you were low in the first place. They probably would have said you should be happy at your 550, you're normal, you're healthy. Now, being up around 860 something, if I remember
Right.
correctly, do you feel the difference?
Yeah. Simply, yes, I feel the difference. And to go back to what you said about the doctor, what I heard often when I would see, my doctor, they would say, you don't have a testosterone problem because I'm looking at you. I heard that a lot. And I said, it's funny because I think we are all experts on ourselves. And I just didn't feel the same. Like, and do like when I work with clients and we do in service, and what happens is, tell me when the last time you were in the best shape of your life. And if it's a 50-year-old man, he says, well, hey, man, when I was 25, I was amazing. And I go, yeah, of course you were. So now I'm running that line between, okay, is it my ego saying that I'm not in the same shape I used to be in? But I had this feeling. I just had this feeling where, I don't feel as energetic. And, I'll give a lot of detail around this. There was a lot of questions in the post. And what they said was, you know, my energy went through the roof. Like I felt a lot better. And more specifically, I felt a lot better pushing through sessions, training sessions. Now, do I feel like $1 million every day? Absolutely not. But there was a notable difference in my energy, There was a notable difference in my strength, and then how my strength improved. And in the end, the testosterone numbers showed. And by the way, you said we spoke about a year ago, roughly. I was more curious to see with these real test results, because the first time I had my testosterone done, it was 270, and I brought it
Ouch.
up into the 800s doing this protocol. And I said, maybe I shared that with a lot of people in the field, and they said, that first test was probably not an accurate test. I said, okay, that's fair, that's fair. Let me do it again. So I ran through the protocol, and I got in the 800s. And then I did it again, and I was in the 500s, and I brought it up to 866. So I knew that it worked, and we will need you to summarize again the process, because there were a lot of questions surrounding that. And there were a lot of people who jumped on and asked questions, and I have some of those questions here. So yes, to answer your question, I felt a lot better, and I think this is an important time, Thomas, to explain why.
Then we're going to get to the protocol you're using in a second. First, I want to revisit the fallacy that you can tell how a man's testosterone levels are by looking at it. It is true that low T is associated with poor body composition. You put on too much visceral fat, too much even subcutaneous fat, and it's true that that's associated with low T, but it's not causal. Testosterone comes from mitochondria, and when the mitochondria aren't healthy, two things can happen: poor body composition and low testosterone. So they have similar origins, and that's why they're associated. But it is also possible to have good body composition and low testosterone. Now, it's rare, and you are an exception in this case, but it's possible because the mitochondria aren't really in the shape they need to be, despite the fact that you've got the muscle tone, despite the fact that you have the low body fat. And what you're doing is stimulating mitophagy, getting rid of the poor mitochondria, and mitobiogenesis, replacing them with better and more plentiful mitochondria so that they can do the job of synthesizing testosterone. So these are the mechanisms that I now understand that we didn't have in our last conversation. And I get to explain what's going on biologically. But that doesn't necessarily help somebody who's saying, okay, what do I do? And they probably want to start with something like what you did. So what have you been doing?
Good question. In its simplest form, what I would do is, I get up pretty early. I'm probably in the gym at, just before 4 o'clock. I immediately go in the cold plunge, neck down, and I'll try to give as much detail as possible. The cold plunge ranges from, I'd say, 35 to 37 degrees, which is pretty cold. I'm in there, and I took note from what you said before, because I used to be a super soldier and say, no matter what happens, I'm in here for 8 minutes neck down. I don't do that anymore. Now if I'm feeling like, I can go a little bit longer, and I just have this feeling like I want more, I'll stay in there for 6 to 8 minutes. Sometimes I'm in there for 3 minutes, but I don't beat myself up about it. I think that's really important to note.
Good.
And then as soon as I get out, I towel off, put my workout shirt on in shorts, and then I immediately go into training. Now, I will tell you this. I do believe, and I did this every day. Now, Saturday and Sunday, I trained, but it was a lighter day, and I did it for 60 days. I know we can get into this later. I don't believe you need to do it every day, number one. Number two, I don't believe you need to have crazy intense weightlifting sessions. In fact, the beginning of my training is usually some sort of interval work that lasts 30 to 35 minutes. So, and I felt, yes, it took me a little bit of time to warm up where I could produce the best results in an interval manner, but I still felt stronger. Like, I know I felt stronger, and I felt like I had more oomph and more push. I think that's also important to know. Um, I think there are a few things there that really matter. Um, to my belief, I don't have scientific proof, but I'm going to implement these things over the next 2 months and then test again and see where I can go. Number one, it's the time from the cold to the training session. Meaning, if I could do it with inside a 10-minute window and start training, okay, that seems like it should be the case. Now, there are other times where I might be answering emails or doing other things, or something happens in the facility where I need to attend to it, and then it's a delayed amount of time before I get to the weightlifting session. Now that I think that I want to shorten that window. Um, Also, I think if I wasn't doing the interval stuff and I was just doing pure push or pull with weights, I think that would also increase it a good deal. I don't think interval training is bad. I am an interval training freak. I absolutely love it. I feel amazing. I have a history of heart issues in my family, and it's important to me to work the heart and make sure I stay on top of my cardiovascular fitness. But that being said, I think I should continue to do that, but possibly at another time in the day or on different days. And I'll make the other days where I do cold plunge and get in the weight room back to back. Those are my thoughts. I have a few others, but please.
There's a lot you said that I agree with. You do not have to do it every day. And we don't know what the minimum effective dose is here. It seems like, although I'm doing it every day and you're going every day, it seems like 3, 4 times a week. And it doesn't have to be for 6 or 8 minutes, but 3, 4 times a week, maybe 3 to 4 minutes a week would be enough. And the reason I say that is when you're just starting out and you feel that shivering, you know that your body is recruiting brown fat. You know you've started cold thermogenesis. You know that you're building mitochondria. They don't disappear just because you took a couple of days off.
Right.
Your mitochondria are more stable than that. And so if it's a matter of going to the gym, because that's where your cold plunge is, and you're the type of guy who's accustomed to going 3, maybe 4 times a week, like you say, don't beat yourself up over the fact that you're not going hard every day.
Right.
Track your own progress and see what the minimum effective dose is for you. What do I feel good with? What are my labs telling me? We don't have a data set that is so robust that we could draw a curve and make reliable predictions for any single individual. The best way to do it is to try it for yourself and see what works for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of people like whenever something like this is spoken about or tried or my self study comes out, it's that doesn't work. I don't know. This is BS. It's like, well, look, I had no idea. I have no interest in pushing this other than if it works, that's great. I just want to feel better. And so I said, let's just give it a try. I mean, it's like literally, from start to finish, it's 10 minutes of my time. It's not a big deal. I've never had a problem being disciplined or consistent. So let's just see how it works. And turns out, yeah, I felt a lot better. In something else that I didn't think about, I should have taken my body fat on the same machine. And so I'll do that as a part. I haven't even done that yet, but I can do that tomorrow and then moving forward, just on the same machine. So there's a baseline. And I think that there could be something there as well. But on
What
this
machine are
study,
you using for body composition?
we use the InBody. It is
Okay.
like one of the
Yep.
top level products that they have.
The
And
in-body scanner is electrical impedance. And so you probably stand on a platform in your bare feet and you grab the handles with your thumbs in the right position, and they will pass a weak electric current through your body. They are measuring the impedance of your body, and they take your height and your weight, and they have an equation that infers your body composition. Now, it's good qualitatively. It'll tell you whether you're going up or whether you're going
right,
down.
right,
It's
right.
not the best quantitatively. But Chris Gethin told me a story. And if you follow Chris Gethin on Instagram, you know he's a world famous bodybuilder.
Mhm.
He started doing his cold plunge. He does it on a regular basis. He's got a Morozko. And he also uses the in-body scanner. And he saw a big jump in his body fat from somewhere around 9%, which is very low, to something more like 13 or 14, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
When you look at Chris, you're saying, oh my God, there's no way this guy has 14% body fat because he is so ripped. But what happens is when you recruit brown fat, you do it around the base of the neck, so the clavicles in between the shoulder blades. You do it right where the electricity from the in-body scanner is passing through from one hand to the next. And brown fat, I'm hypothesizing, does not have the same impedance as white fat does. Because brown fat is so rare in adult human beings, I doubt whether the in-body people have calibrated their algo, their equation, for people who have detectable brown fat. Chris got a jump, not because his body composition actually changed, but because the type of fat in his body was changing. When you recruit brown fat, it will throw the in-body scanner off. It's the equation in the in-body scanner isn't meant for brown fat. I've seen this replicated in two other people. I'm one of them. When I first started my ice bath, I was doing my in-body scan, once a week out of curiosity because I was getting really into my own fitness and trying to keep my weight down. I saw this big jump and it was kind of discouraging. But it wasn't until I saw it in Chris and another individual that I said, hang on a second, this is an artifact of the way we're measuring. It is not, it's a change in the type of fat I have, not a change in the overall composition. And so I'm really curious to see what your in-body scanner will say too.
Well, I'll tell you that I know the in-body, we use it for a baseline. I think it's good to track, and I think it's good to track on the same machine. I'm not a big tracker of my weight, and nor am I a big tracker of my uh, body fat. I do test it. I just do it maybe a couple times a year as opposed to, once a week, once a month. I know on this machine my body fat is extraordinarily low. It's been 4, it's been 3, and I haven't done it after the protocol. Some even tell me that, I need to, bulk up a little bit, but to be quite honest, I feel good. I feel good. So I'm not trying, my numbers are good in regards to PSA, cholesterol, and everything. So I'm not about to attempt to manipulate that just based off a body fat number. I think it speaks to, it's not a perfect algorithm, and that's fine. But I know what it is on that machine. That's enough for me. If it goes up or down, I can attribute it to the way I train, the way I sleep, stress. I know my behavior and I know my lifestyle very well, so it's not a problem.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So
you know,
you put up a post, got a lot of attention, and it got a lot of questions.
yeah,
And maybe it would be helpful if we see if we can address those questions now. Have you got them in front of you?
absolutely, absolutely. So the first question was in regards to the study. In the study at the end, I clarified this by saying I spoke to, I heard about Thomas on Rogan. I reached out to Thomas. He was amazing in getting back to me immediately. We scheduled something. We did a podcast. He educated me on the protocol and the science. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try this. He, this gentleman, I just wanted to try it because you tried it and it worked for you. I said, well, what do I have to do outside of my career in building our brand? I'm going to do this. As I said before, it takes 10 minutes, not a big deal. Now, in this study, the Japanese study, it said in the summary, someone mentioned, did I read that correctly? The study says it did not improve testosterone. So can you basically break that down and explain that to us, the actual summary of the study?
Yeah, I should probably go to the study itself
Right.
because I remember this comment was from someone who was quoting the conclusions that the authors wrote.
Right.
And I want to quote them correctly. So I'm searching for the study in my database right now. This
Okay.
is Sakamoto and others from 1991. They
Right.
looked at a cohort of young Japanese men, and they only did cold stimulation. They did not do whole body up to the neck immersion. So they
Okay.
took, I think it was the non-dominant limb, and they immerse it in ice water from the elbow on down. And they did this cold stimulation after a session on the exercise bike. They drew blood, they measured testosterone and luteinizing hormone. And they found that if their subjects exercised and then did the cold, luteinizing hormone, which signals the gonads to produce testosterone, luteinizing hormone and the total T went down. And then for some reason, these researchers reversed it. And nobody does this, but they said, okay, we're going to do the cold first, and then we're going to do 20 minutes on the exercise bike. And they saw testosterone and luteinizing hormone go up. In their conclusions, because your reader is very sharp, they said, these results suggest that physical exercise increases TS level in serum, so the total testosterone in your blood, by increasing luteinizing hormone and NA, which might be noradrenaline levels. But
Right.
these tendencies, they said, were not found with cold water stimulation. And so your reader is asking, isn't Professor Seager contradicting the authors in their summary? Yes, I am. They didn't test cold water stimulation alone. This sentence suggesting that physical exercise will increase the testosterone is not substantiated by their data. They didn't say, we're going to test physical exercise and then we're going to test cold. They said, we're going to test this combination and we're going to do it in different orders. If I were reviewing this paper in 1991, and I didn't even have a master's degree back then, like I would be nowhere near qualified to do it. But if it were sent to my desk for a review, I'd say, your summary here is inaccurate. That's not what you measured. However, that doesn't mean it's wrong. If you separate the cold from the exercise, in men, you will not get a testosterone boost. So let me see if I can clarify.
Please.
Cold water alone will not necessarily give a man a testosterone boost. There have been a couple of other studies that look at cold water stimulation or cryotherapy in men. And that's not enough to get you that immediate, like in the lab, in the study boost. Long term, we don't know because we've never seen that study. But over the course of immediately after you're cold can lower your testosterone unless you exercise afterwards. And this is the key aspect that we can add on to this study. Anyone who reads this study and comes away with the impression that cold water will not boost testosterone is drawing the right conclusion. For men, it must be cold and then exercise. We don't really know why. And we don't know if that is true in the long run or if it's just true in the short run, and women are completely different. There has been one clinical trial of women and salivary testosterone. And so salivary is not as good as blood serum. But what they discovered is that cold stimulation in women will boost salivary testosterone. It will not in men. So what's my response to your reader? The sentence is not drawn from the data in the paper. And in that sense, it's not good science. But that doesn't mean that the conclusion the reader is drawing is incorrect. And there's a lot of confusion on this point because you still have people, Instagram influencers out there saying, cold doesn't do anything for your testosterone. And
Right.
it's very difficult to explain that it's cold and exercise in that order in which we are seeing these remarkable results. And now they've been replicated. I have at least a dozen men who are sending me lab reports, telling me what they're doing, and saying they're getting this enormous boost. I also have two men who are not. And they say, well, maybe it doesn't work for me, or it's unreliable in this respect, or whatever. In those two cases that I've documented, both of those men are on medications that interfere with testosterone production. So you cannot take a med that is going to suppress your testosterone and overcome the side effect of that medication by using cold and exercise. This is what I'm learning from these two case studies that did not see a boost. You've got to get off the meds that might be reducing your testosterone for this to work. And you can't do the cold alone, but it doesn't take a lot of exercise. It could be a walk, it could be the treadmill, it could be the stairs. You don't have to go hard. I've heard from men who say, I just walk for 20 minutes after I jump in the water down at the beach, and they're getting a big boost too.
That's super interesting. I certainly have a few more questions here. What I attribute it to, and this is not the scientific breakdown that you could provide to the listeners, but I know this. I used to work at a performance facility, and the athletes, we would focus on speed. We would do speed 4 days a week. Now we were doing 4 speed days a week, 3 lifting days a week. So on 3 of those days, we do speed for 45 minutes outside in the heat. Then they come into the weight room. Now they're certainly warmed up for the weightlifting session, but the challenge is that they're not going to have the same output or push in that weight room. They just won't, right? Because they've already used half of their gas tank outside, or maybe more in some cases, so they don't have the same kind of push. So the correlation I make there is if I'm in cold water immersion for a certain period of time, I put the mitochondria in this peak or better or more optimized state to perform in the weight room. And therefore, if my normal push is here, now I can push here. And now if my normal time training is here, now I can train this much, a little bit more push, a little bit more training time. What's the adaptations that happen after strength training in general is testosterone, right? Increased testosterone. So that's not a scientific breakdown or drawing the correlation between luteinizing hormone and testosterone, but I know this, that my body is in a better position to push a little bit more and for a little bit longer. And therefore the result is increase the T a little bit. How does that sound?
Your intuitions here are spot on. If I remember, you're in Florida. Speed training takes a really big facility. Like if you're going to do it indoors, you got to have a big facility, which is a lot of rent. So the guys I know in Florida, they do it outside like everybody else. So
Right.
you're doing your sprints, and most of the year it's going to be humid and it's going to be hot. And this is exhausting because your mitochondria need to stay cool to perform. When you stress your mitochondria, they will produce reactive oxygen species. And in a short acute burst, it's fine. The reactive oxygen species will signal mitophagy and mitobiogenesis. That's a hormetic stress. But you probably know from your football days, especially when in the early days of camp, that heat exhaustion down south can be a serious risk. Sometimes people die. Because when the reactive oxygen species exceed a certain level, they begin to attack the DNA in the mitochondria. Your body will shut down. This is fatigue. Fatigue is a mechanism inside your body to protect your mitochondria from dangerous overwork. So your guys are doing their speed training outside. They're in the Florida heat. They come inside and their mitochondria are already taxed. Your body's adaptive mechanisms are, we're going to shut down power output. We're going to shut down endurance. We're going to create the sensation of fatigue so that we don't cause irreparable or dangerous damage to the mitochondria. Craig Heller is at Stanford University, and he does what's called percooling. This is extracting heat from the body in between sets. He has worked with professional, highly trained athletes, and he's worked with sort of just graduate students, untrained athletes. And he gets an enormous boost in peak muscle power output and in endurance by extracting the heat that would otherwise signal fatigue and shut down the mitochondria. So what you're experiencing with your athletes in your own body is exactly what Craig Heller is measuring in his lab at Stanford University. Now, we do pre-cooling. That is, do your ice bath first and then do your workout. You could go into the ice bath in between sets and you could do a little bit more heat extraction. But Heller's study was only extracting through the palms. He has a device called the Cool Mitt that applies a vacuum so that the blood circulation is maintained in the palms, and then he applies cold to suck the heat out of the palm. Because we're an ice bath, we do the whole body. And all of that surface area and all of that cold water is going to suck a lot more heat out in the same amount of time. The only people that I've seen, that I've talked to who are using the ice bath for her cooling or like in between exercise sessions are the Canadian hockey players. Those guys are they're pretty crazy about the cold. They have a lot of experience with it and they seem to get something out of it.
Well, that's super helpful and a great breakdown of kind of what I was feeling, which leads me to my next question, or the question that was asked in the post. Can you get the same effect from cold showers? And I know you just kind of answered this a good bit, but what are your thoughts on the cold shower protocol prior to training?
You can get a lot of the same metabolic benefits from a cold shower that you would get from an ice bath. You can do cold stimulation, you can do heat extraction, and depending upon the temperature of the water, I'm in Phoenix, and in the summer, there's no such thing as a cold shower. Our tap water goes up to like 90 degrees Fahrenheit. You might have a similar challenge in Florida. But if you're in a northern climate and you have a surface water source, and that water's coming out 40, 45 degrees, a couple of minutes in the cold shower will extract a lot of heat. There's a way to do it. I don't let it go on my head. And maybe that's just because I'm uncomfortable with it. But I do put it on my chest. I'll do that for a minute or two. I'll turn around and I'll put it on my back. This is where the brown fat is located anyway. And if I don't do it that way, then I have trouble breathing through it. The cold shower gets me pumped up and angry, but I don't get the same meditative, like parasympathetic nervous system response that I get from being in the bath. There's nothing about the shower for me that is relaxing, but the ice bath will do that. Now, if I'm just looking for the pre-cooling, I think cold shower is fine. You might as well get amped up. You might as well activate that fight or flight. If you're going to go hit it hard, then you might as well be in that state of mind where you've extracted the heat from your body and mentally you're like, I'm ready to go crush a workout.
Mm-hmm. Oh, terrific. That's super helpful. The cold showers are very shocking, way more shocking than the cold plunge, I believe. The next question would be from a woman reached out and who's a friend. She said, I wonder if it does the same thing for women. So what are your thoughts on the results for women?
It should be no surprise that men and women are different, especially when it comes to sex hormones. But there are still a number of misconceptions about women that we got to clear up. The first one is that the most important sex hormone, the dominant sex hormone in women, is testosterone. And people don't know this because we think of estrogen as the female hormone, and it's true. But a healthy woman will have 3 or 4 times as much testosterone as she will have estrogen in her bloodstream. Testosterone is essential for the health and well-being of women. So we shouldn't be ignoring women who come in at low T just because we're preoccupied with men. Men have so much more testosterone, up to 10 times as much testosterone as a woman does. And we know these sort of secondary sex characteristics that come from the testosterone. So in a man, it's primarily produced in the gonads or in the testicles. But women, the testosterone is distributed throughout their body. It's not just the ovaries. The ovaries account for maybe a quarter, could be a little bit more of their overall body testosterone. The rest comes from skin cells, fat cells, and adrenal cells. So what happens in a woman's body when she gets into the cold? It stimulates her skin, her fat, and her adrenals. The cold doesn't have to reach the ovaries. For a woman to get a boost, she's working with those three other areas, the adrenal, skin, and the fat cells that produce testosterone. When they get stimulated, her testosterone goes up right away. She doesn't have to exercise afterwards. There are some wonderfully beneficial effects to higher testosterone in women, whether she's pre-menopausal or post-menopausal. But the number one reason that women go on testosterone therapy is typically low libido, because testosterone is the lust hormone, the sex drive hormone. When a woman, and it typically happens after menopause, is experiencing low libido and she wants to restore that kind of sex drive that she remembers from being younger, a clinician might try and adapt a male testosterone protocol to her. It's a little easier when she's no longer got a cycle, but there's still no FDA approved testosterone therapy for women. And so women are a little bit overlooked. There's another misconception, and that is that high testosterone can result in women from poor metabolic health. And let me explain. In men, poor metabolic health is associated with low testosterone. But in women, poor metabolic health, insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, can lead to something called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. It is the leading cause of infertility among women of childbearing age in the United States. The cysts develop around the ovaries, and they impinge upon the ovaries in a way that causes the ovary to make too much testosterone. So this is what's really surprising and counterintuitive for women. If they have PCOS, their testosterone will be too high. And then they might say, but Professor Seager, I don't want to do an ice bath because I don't want my I don't want a mustache. I don't want my testosterone to go any higher. And they're correct to be cautious. But what the ice bath does for women who have PCOS is correct their insulin resistance. By stimulating their mitochondrial function, improving the quality of their mitochondria, their insulin sensitivity goes up. The PCOS resolves, and their testosterone actually comes down from abnormally too high as a result of the PCOS to normal and healthy again because the PCOS is resolved. And at least in animal models, they don't have good case studies with women, their fertility can be restored. If PCOS is the cause of infertility in a woman, resolving the PCOS can often allow her to conceive. So this is not a testosterone issue anymore. This is a metabolic health issue. And because I've covered a lot of ground, I want to see if I can summarize. In women, if testosterone is too low, whether they're pre or post-menopausal, then an ice bath can bring it up by stimulating the skin and the adrenal glands and the fat cells to produce testosterone. But if their testosterone is too high as a result of PCOS, the ice bath can fix the insulin resistance, the metabolic dysfunction that is causing PCOS, and bring their testosterone down. There's nothing like this that applies to men. And we can't take a look at male studies and say, we're just going to cut the dosages down a little bit and we'll get the ladies all fixed up. A woman's body works differently in this aspect from a man's, and unfortunately, we don't have anywhere near enough research about how to do hormone balancing in women.
Understood. Super helpful, super helpful. I think now one of the main questions that I received often, and I gave my thoughts on we answered this before, the timing, but now the temperature. The temperature doesn't need to be, 34 degrees. And, I think you covered this. You did a great job covering this last time, but I would really love to hear your thoughts and have the listeners hear your thoughts on the temperature.
I'm glad you asked because Morozko makes the coldest ice bath in the world. You know, you go down to 32 and then it's just a block of ice. Other companies that are buying chillers from China, they're a lot cheaper. They don't go down that cold because we don't use a chiller. We bring the cold to the water. But when you have a Chinese made chiller, you're bringing the water to the cold. You can't pump ice. And so you can't get down below 38, 37. And the other companies will say, and that's cold enough. And it is. For 90% of people, they're going to get a lot of metabolic benefit. They're even going to get some mental benefit out of doing their 38 or 39. They're going to crank their chiller all the way down, and they're going to work that thing as hard as it can go to get into that upper 30s. It's fine. It just doesn't work for me. I was in Austin, Texas. There's a conference, the Society of Risk Analysis. And this is kind of a big deal for me as a professor at ASU. I work in risk analysis. So I'm going to go to a conference. I'm going to see some of my friends. And I decided to stay at the proper hotel in Austin because they're customers of ours. So I go down to their little spa area and I say, oh, I want to book the ice bath. And they say, that's great. What's your name, what's your room number, and what's your phone number, and what's your email address? So I say, well, I'm TPSEAGER. Now you can email me, at MOROZKO, and she's keying all this in. And then it hit. She goes, oh, now I know why you want to use the ice bath. She recognized me at that moment. And she says, well, am I doing anything wrong? She got a little self-conscious. I said, I'm not here to tell you that. I'm just here to, I want to check it out and get the customer perspective. Got in there, Mark, it's 45 degrees. It's just a cold plunge. They're not even using, the feature that I take so much pride in. I booked this thing for 45 minutes. I said, okay, 45 degrees. I'm going to give it a try. The problem is that 45 degrees is boring for me because I'm not getting that mental challenge. I'm getting a lot of heat extraction, but it doesn't scare me. So I got in there and AJK is there with me and she's going to take some video and 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 25 minutes go by. And I'm doing a little shivering at this point. But I'm saying, hey, I wonder how long I can go. And she says, Tom, you only have this room for 45. If you're going to use the sauna, you're running out of time. And I said, she's right. That sauna is only 190. I'm not even going to break a sweat. Mark, I couldn't rewarm, in the time that I had left. So for me, I like it colder for two reasons. The first reason is I see those ice chunks floating around. And it activates, what Joe Rogan calls his inner bitch, right? It activates that kind of fear response to me. I'm like, crap, I don't want to do this. And that victory, that doing the hard thing that I don't really want to do, that's what Huberman talks about with your anterior mid-cingulate cortex. You got to do the stuff that is uncomfortable. And it's not uncomfortable until it gets down to 34 for me. So that's one. And the other is, I don't have all day to sit around in these cold plunges. Like, I'm going to do my 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm going to get on with my day.
You have a job you got to get to?
I got places to go, Mark.
The goal is to be the biohacker where I can just biohack all day and not have to work. I might be 20 years out from that, but it's coming.
If I had Brian Johnson's money, maybe I'd have more time. Probably not, because me, I'm always like, oh, I just got a notification for a new paper, and then I want to read it and mark it up and do a post on it or something like that. I have more interesting things to do with my life than sit in a cold plunge for 20 minutes a day. So I keep it down to 2 to 4 minutes, and I go super cold.
I hear you. And look, I understand what we're talking about. It's not for everyone. As you have, I've discovered that this helps me in so many ways. The challenge, the mental challenge, the mindset, the consistency, the discipline, the way I feel now with my testosterone going up. It's for 4 minutes. It's a minuscule investment for 4 minutes. It's really not that hard. But I find the people that try to negotiate out of it, well, you don't need to do that, and that doesn't work, and that's not necessary. I find that they're if you negotiate so hard out of something, it's probably something you should try. That's my motto in life.
Those are all the reasons to do it. You
Sure.
see people now saying, "Oh, it's the dumbest thing you can do. You're going to burn out your adrenals. It causes oxidative stress." Yeah, so does exercise.
That's
You
right.
know, of course, cortisol goes up when you exercise. Of course, you create reactive oxygen species in your mitochondria. Of exercise and cold, they mimic one another. Are you going to tell people to stop exercising because of the cortisol spike or because of the oxidative stress caused by the? It's ridiculous. This is a social phenomenon. This is not a physiological argument. You go back a couple of years, and Rogan would not shut up about ice baths. You know, he had Jim Gaffigan coming on his show, and he's like, "Hey, let's talk about ice baths." Jim Gaffigan made his whole career out of laughing about junk food and eating cheese and things. Jim Gaffigan's not a paragon of health and fitness, but it was on Rogan's mind. It's what he wanted to talk about. And this whole phenomena goes through the internet and social media where people are posting and ice baths and they get a lot of attention.
Mm.
The way
I
to
will.
get clicks now is to be one of those guys who says, no, ice baths are dumb. It's sort of like go counter to the trend. It's got nothing to do with
Right.
what's going to benefit the audience. It has everything to do with what's going to get more clicks onto
Right.
the channel.
Right. Clickbait, just draw more attention, and that was one of my thoughts before I posted. I said, I wonder what's going to happen here. And I think like 400 and a little over 400 people shared it. And I started to get a lot of questions. And I can't thank you enough for coming on and answering a lot of these questions. And one of the things I wanted to note about the Morozko, I think it's an unbelievable plunge unit, but more specifically, not only because it gets cold, but what I like about it is when you look at a body of water and there's a sheath of ice on it, that does something special to your mind. You really got to lock in and focus, and that I thought that was the coolest thing. I don't know how you did that, but I love that part of Morosco, the temperature and the ice.
I agree. There's something about that visual stimulation of seeing the ice. I mean, it's great for Instagram, right? People know it's cold, but there's something that happens in your brain. And there's a South African medical doctor who gave a name to it. His name is Tim Noakes. He was working with Lewis Pugh. Now, Lewis Pugh is this British, like, world record holder, Arctic swimmer, outdoor swimmer guy. Lewis Pugh was training in South Africa for an Antarctic swim. And so Tim Noakes is monitoring all his vital signs, including his core body temperature. And he found that right before Lewis Pugh would get into the cold water, his core temperature would go up. Doesn't make any sense. He's not cold. He hasn't activated his brown fat or anything, right? There's no environmental stimulus. Noakes said he called it anticipatory thermogenesis. He said Pugh could raise his core body temperature with only his thoughts because he was imagining getting into the cold water, and his brain signaled the brown fat. Brown fat is highly innervated. That is, it's connected to the nervous system. So it's the brain telling the brown fat to turn on. And even before he gets into the water, the brown fat's already warming him up. Now, when you read Vim's account of how he does his training in Poland, he says he can do the same thing. He says he can warm himself up with his breath and with his mind. And sure enough, this anticipatory thermogenesis that Noakes discovered, it's now been measured in other people who are sort of regular cold water practitioners. When you stare at the ice floating in the water, it does something to your thoughts and to your nervous system. It challenges you in a different way than, let's say, I don't know, if you're at the beach and the water's pretty cold, but there's no ice in there. So for me, I love the beach. I think the stream or the frozen lake is probably the best way to do your cold plunge. But Morozko is the next best way. Sometimes I call it the next best thing to nature because it's grounded, because it will have the ice, because you can put the salt in there if that's the way you want it. I have like 8 pounds of Epsom salt in mine. And I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a 5 hour drive from the ocean. So I got to build a machine that will bring some part of the ocean to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely a phenomenal machine. So kudos to you and your company, and you guys do a great job. Um, so
Thanks.
uh, I think lastly, if you wanted to set people up for giving this a try, can you just walk us through exactly what they should be doing to your protocol, or just how to start, and just give them the main tips? I think that'd be a great takeaway and a great recap.
Okay, thanks for asking. I got a story behind this. I was at the Global Wellness Summit in Edinburgh, Scotland. And, meeting people, Wim Hof is there, we talk and stuff like this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got to get to the airport. Next flight from Edinburgh to Heathrow, I need a taxi. And my taxi driver is asking me about what I do, ice baths. He goes, oh, I'm so curious. What is the optimal time and temperature that I should be doing to start my ice bath practice? And at that moment, I realized that if cab drivers are asking me these kinds of questions, we've really gotten out. Like, this is on the verge of going mainstream. But I kind of let this poor guy have it. I'm like, optimal time and temperature. I don't know you. I'm not a physician. I don't know how cold adapted you. I don't know the way it works. You got to think there's no optimal time and temperature for everyone, Mark. I think maybe this is coming from the pharmaceutical industry. They'll say, take 3 of these 3 times a day, as if this was the right thing for every single patient. But that's not the way it works. It's not the way exercise works. Nobody who came up to you and said, Mark, what is the one best weight and number of reps to do a shoulder press that works for everybody? It would make no sense. You'd say, well, it depends upon your physiology and the extent of your prior weight training. Cold is like that. The right time and temperature for you depends upon the degree to which you are cold adapted. If you are naive, if you haven't done any cold training at all, here's a good rule of thumb. Go cold enough to gasp, go long enough to feel the shiver. And that might mean fill up a bathtub with tap water. Don't just use cold water. Maybe, depending on where you are, that tap water is 60 degrees Fahrenheit. If you go in and you feel that kind of gasp reflex, it's plenty cold enough. If you got to stay in there 8, 9 minutes before you feel like shivering, fine, do that. When you're just starting out, go cold enough to gasp and long enough to shiver. It takes about 2 weeks under those conditions to recruit new brown fat so that instead of the shivering, your body will change to non-shivering thermogenesis because the muscles will keep you warm through that shivering action, but you're not going to feel the action of the brown fat. It doesn't shiver. After about 2 weeks of daily cold plunging, you will lose the urge to shiver unless you're able to drop the temperature down further and further. So sometimes our Morozko customers, I say, look, start at 50. Take it down 1 degree Fahrenheit every day. If you can do 50, then you know you can do 49, and you know you can do 48. Well, I got a call from a guy. He says, look, I've been at this for 3 weeks, and I'm still shivering. When is this ever going to end? And I said, well, what temperature are you? And he said, I'm about 36. I said, you started in the mid 50s? He goes, yeah, but it's not getting any easier. I said, well, what do you expect?
Yeah,
Because he's challenging himself. It's like adding a little bit more weight to the bar
yeah.
every day. So just keep it where you are. You will feel your cold adaptation. Now where I am, it's 34 degrees, 2 to 4 minutes. I do every day.
Mhm. Okay, that's great. I was thinking as you were speaking, the last part, I'd say the final question I have is what I'm going to do is test again in 2 months. I'm going to modify a few things and see what happens. But now I want to see, I guess there'd have to be another study after that, another 2 months, and discontinue it and see what happens. Like, how long will I sustain this testosterone once I get it up there via this protocol? I wonder how long lasting it is. What are your thoughts?
I've been at this for 4 years. I still test out around 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. It's not as super elevated as I was when I first discovered this, but it's pretty dang high considering I'm now 58. I'm 6 feet tall. I weigh 220 pounds, and I know I should weigh less, but I do so much reading and writing. I'm fairly sedentary. At least my metabolism and my testosterone levels are good. And I test out pretty well for a man my age on all the strength exercises, whether, somebody would be like, well, how many push-ups can you do? So I had to find out. And it's 33. Look, that's not the paragon of fitness, but neither is it what you would expect from a guy with my body composition and my sedentary lifestyle. I have enough strength, and I think it's coming from the testosterone. But cardiovascularly, I'm a wreck. Like, my VO2 max is terrible. I'm at 28 or something like this. And I think if you look that up on the table, they say, yeah, you're going to die in 7 years. I am an enigma to my doctor. He doesn't understand the effects that cold can have on the metabolism and on the muscles. He's just looking for these other markers and trying to kind of associate them, like, 'cause most people are here, and I don't fit the pattern. So what am I trying to say? You retesting in 2 months are working against seasonality. That is, in 2 months, it's going to be, let's say, beginning of February. As a matter of fact, let's say you were going to retest at the time of the Super Bowl. Here's the challenge for somebody playing that deep into the NFL. It was Nick Bosa who pointed this out to me. Testosterone levels go up and down seasonally. They're correlated with vitamin D. So in the summer, late summer, your testosterone levels and your vitamin D are pretty high. And then in the mid-winter, your testosterone levels go down. Nick Bosa says, I'm going to the Super Bowl at the time when I need the testosterone the most. And yet, because of this seasonal curve, everybody in the NFL is playing the most important game of the season at their lowest testosterone level. He goes, I want to stay higher for longer so I can go deeper into the postseason with the testosterone I need to recover from 1 week and play the next week. And I thought this was genius. Nick is a very thoughtful guy. So how do you do that? You get some cold. Now, in Florida, you're fortunate. You can also get some sunshine. You will have enough UVB in the middle of the day to continue to stimulate vitamin D production when you live in. Most of the country doesn't live in Florida. Even Phoenix, Arizona is not quite far enough south to rely on that midday sun to keep your vitamin D levels high. And so a lot of people will supplement. And I'm becoming convinced that supplements are only good in medical cases, these clinical cases where you have a symptomatic acute deficiency. That chronic vitamin D supplementation is counterproductive. So I'm not arguing if you're trying to treat rickets in a child or something. I'm not arguing that you shouldn't use supplements as an intervention. I am arguing that it is healthier for your body to get the sunlight to stimulate the vitamin D production and to substitute cold for that testosterone boost when you can't get the sun and the vitamin D. I'm really curious to know where you come out in 2 months. You should be lower, Mark.
It'll be
So
interesting.
we're going to say,
I'm going to make
yeah.
those modifications. I'm going to take less time from cold to training, but I'm also going to try to implement more weight training days stacked with the cold water immersion. And then I'm doing my very best not to change. I'm modifying very specific variables and not going to modify everything else.
Well,
You know,
let me ask you about electrolytes. As you're modifying these variables, have you looked at magnesium and zinc?
well, I do supplement in magnesium, and I do take electrolytes while I try to take the element packets while I train. So I'm really trying to hit that. You know, I'm taking in a little bit of salt. You're in Florida; it's a sweaty place. I'm not against that at all. It seems to be my numbers seem to be good or on point. So I think that's important as well. But that's been like that forever. Like I remain consistent.
That makes sense. When a person starts a regular practice of cold plunge therapy, ice baths, whatever we call it, they're going to need more magnesium. And a lot of people don't realize the association. Magnesium will catalyze hundreds of reactions. These are the metabolic reactions. Mitochondria are rich in magnesium. And so when you start regular cold, your body needs more magnesium. It will steal it out of your bones to feed your mitochondria unless you supplement to replace that, to give your mitochondria the magnesium that they need. And it sounds like you're on top of it.
Try to be. Try to be. Like I said before, I know where we there's always more to learn medically in regards to science, but I believe we are experts in knowing how we feel, just knowing how we feel. So let me just say that. Thomas, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about Morozko if they're interested in an amazing product, an amazing cold plunge?
Morozkoforge.com. Google hates us. And when we started, like, we were impossible to find. But now, if you search for Morozko, we're like the number one Google result on 4 different misspellings of it. So you'll get to us, you know. If you wanna learn more without buying a $15,000 ice bath to start this, you can just start with the book. I put every single one of my articles in this book. The articles are all available for free. People can read them online. But sometimes, you know, you want to write in the margins or you want to highlight or something like that. It's not on Amazon. It's only on Morozko. For those people who are ready to make a commitment and they say, this cold plunging is working for me, I want to do it every day, and I need to have it at my house to do that, that's why Morozko exists. We're really selling the convenience of it rather than the wood and the metal and the technology in there. A lot of people can get maybe 80% of the same benefit for a lot less cost doing their own DIY thing or modifying a chest freezer. But there's a certain point at which you don't want your life to be about a DIY thing anymore. You don't want to be caulking up the chest freezer or worrying about whether it's grounded. Those are our customers, the people who say, this is going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. And I want the best machine so it's as easy and accessible as I need it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just an incredible. I know I've said it many times through the podcast, but it just is like I have friends that use it. I know a lot about it. It's just a very special product that is the best of the best. So kudos to you once again for that. I really can't thank you enough. Maybe we get on again in another 2 months and we talk again. I think I'm getting a lot of your time, and I'm very grateful. But I know everyone's appreciating the information and the download of data. So thank you so much.
This has been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
All right, absolutely, absolutely. Wishing you the very best. Have an amazing day, Thomas. Thanks again.
You too. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.